everyone, welcome back to Brome Bird News. I hope you've been enjoying all the outdoors. We made a point of going and hiking every single weekend. I mean, we're surrounded by mountains here. It is summertime after all. All right, let's address the bee wasp problem with hummingbird feeders. There are two things that I found work the best. First of all, if you see, I'm just gonna call them wasps, around the feeder, it means that there's been spillage. Not necessarily by you. I got squirrels and other birds checking it out, setting it in motion. So when you see that, just take your hummingbird feeder down and wash it completely. Get rid of all that sticky stuff on the outside of the feeder. And another thing that really works is actually filling your feeder, not all the way, but only just a little bit below the feeding ports. Right here, I have just half the feeder that's filled. Hummingbirds have no problem reaching in, but it's too deep for bees and wasps. Fred Weitzman from Idaho and Jason English from Montreal have observed the same thing, a lone snow goose hanging out with a flock of Canada geese. So they're just curious to know what is happening.
Jason English, you living in the Montreal area, and Fred Weitzman hailing from Idaho should exchange notes. You're both witnesses to lone snow geese adopting a flock of Canada geese. And I believe that I had a third person this year who sent me a picture of a snow goose crossing a road with some Canada geese, but I can't put my hands on it. This kind of behavior is not strange to me because I've had occasional reports in earlier years. More important, the behavior does not really surprise me. Usually it's a lone snow goose which has become separated from a flock of its own kind and then joins up with a flock of Canada geese. In some cases it might be a hunter-wounded snow goose that can fly, but not able to keep up with its own flock. Or it might have got displaced from its flock due to weather conditions. I don't believe I've ever seen the opposite, a lone Canada goose hanging around with a flock of snows, but it wouldn't surprise me to know that it happens. Having an odd duck, or in this case an odd goose, join a flock of another kind is to be expected. One of the reasons these social birds hang about in flocks is because they're usually composed of family members that migrate together. But obviously the snow goose can't be a family member. But the ultimate reasons, as Jason points out, must surely be for protection and for food. It makes good sense to have multiple pairs of eyes and ears on the lookout for foxes, coyotes, eagles, human hunters, and other predators. A single goose probably doesn't last very long on its own. And finding good food sources can also be achieved more efficiently by a flock rather than a single bird. Now, as to Fred's question on his snow goose's contribution to daycare for Canada geese, it's much harder to explain. He's obviously not getting any kind of gene inheritance reward for doing so. The snow goose could be a dominant bird from its original flock, and thus demonstrating this fact by leading the flock while swimming. Perhaps it's getting some experience by engaging in this behavior, or perhaps its contribution is helping it to gain some acceptance from its adoptive flock. All three explanations, or some combination of them, might make sense too. I'm sure though that it's hormone-based, but to be fair, it's not easy to get into the head of a goose.
It's been known for years that neonic pesticides are absolutely horrid to pollinators, and recent studies have also proven that they're pretty toxic to birds too. Remember when Dr. Berg talked about how these pesticides stunt birds' growth? Well, this is just a reminder, if you love birds, if you want to watch and feed them in your backyard, please stay away from any kind of pesticides, and that includes the seeds that you buy to plant in your gardens, because a lot of them actually come coated in pesticides. So when the seed is planted, it continues to grow with all those pesticides, keeping all the unwanted bugs away. This summer we've had so much fun with our garden. Some things turned out, others didn't really. But what we were really surprised is how rich an ecosystem it is. Every day we see wasps eating all kinds of eggs, birds picking up something, snakes checking it out, and then of course hummingbirds have just been all over our pea plants and our bean plants. And now we have so many of them, I don't actually know what to do with them, but they're so tasty.
Hummingbirds are once again in the science news. Having already astounded us with their flying abilities and their amazing use of ultraviolet light detection, we've now learned that they can keep track of the most nectar-rich flowers in the order that appear in a given lineup of blossoms. In other words, they can remember the most productive flower and then the second and the third and even the fourth. Apparently lots of animals can count, and some can even understand how things fit together in a sequence. But to date, there have been no examples of a wild animal actually using that ability in a natural setting. The finding was discovered by Susan Healy of the University of St. Andrews and her colleagues who studied rufous hummingbirds in the Rocky Mountains. These birds were chosen because they have well-defined breeding territories, as well as excellent memories as to what's in them. The birds go from one nectar-rich flower to another, just like a seasoned shopper in a department store. But how do they know how to do that? So the researchers captured and marked 9 hummers for identification and set up 10 artificial flowers with the ability to add sugar water to each of them. By watching which flowers the birds chose, even when they were arranged in a different manner, the scientists were able to determine that the hummingbirds have a concept of numerical sequence, something never before seen in a wild vertebrate.
I love talking about the revival of the California condor. Thankfully, California is not the only place with a successful story like that. In England, the red kite was basically hunted to extinction locally. And then in 1990, 13 breeding pairs were brought from Spain and released in the Chiltern Hills. At the same time, the UK government banned hunting and introduced programs to protect the birds of prey. And ever since, because of all the efforts done by researchers and also local farmers, the population of the red kite has increased to 1,800 breeding pairs, which is actually 10% of all red kites in the world. And another story, cat and dog cafes are becoming very popular all over the world. I mean, I find it's so therapeutic to go grab a coffee and then pat a furry friend, especially if you can't or don't have one. Well, leave it to the Russians to take it to the next level. So next time you're in Moscow, which I'm hoping to do when I go visit my brother next time, stop by the Owl House. This is a cafe where you can grab a meal and a coffee and hang out, well, with owls. These birds have been trained to be friendly with humans. This is also a center where researchers observe and learn about owls' behavior, and they also help owls in need. You don't have to pay for your meal or for your coffee. It's all included in your visit, but you are charged by the minute. During the lockdown, I shared a couple of stories about cities in New Zealand being rewilded due to less traffic and less noise pollution. Well, this experience has resonated with New Zealanders so much that the New Zealand government is now working on a plan to reintegrate nature into everybody's lives. There is no official roadmap of the plan yet, but it's being based on protecting and creating new habitats in urban areas, and also recognizing that economic development often happens at the expense of the environment. So by reworking their economic priorities to include protecting and the enriching of the environment, the government is hoping to create a system to improve everybody's quality of life. Well, that's it. That's all for today. Again, if you participate in our photo contest, please don't forget to ID your birds. And if you know of a good place that sells organic seeds, please share with us. We'll pass it along to everyone else. Take care, and I'll catch you in 2 weeks.